Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel. This is the summary of chapter number 11 of this year's economic survey. We have done first 10 chapters so far, 3 more are remaining. As you know, there are total 13 chapters in this year's economic survey, touching upon various themes of finances in the country and the different government initiatives in the coming months. If you are new here, do hit the like and the subscribe button so that you can get notified about all the new videos that are coming up here. If you want the PDF of these sessions, you can join my Telegram channel. The link is in the description of the video. These PDF will help you revise this later on as well when you want to revise this during the mains examination. So chapter number 10 or rather 11, chapter 11 is titled Fiscal Developments, Fiscal Resilience Amidst Challenges. So what exactly is the theme of this chapter? The government of India, as you know, usually almost always spends more than what we earn. So we run into fiscal deficit. In simple terms, if the government's earning is 100 rupees, the government usually has an expenditure of 105, 110. So the remaining money usually comes in the form of deficit. The government takes loans either from the market, that is in the national market, local market, or the government takes loans from outside the country. Now, it is an endeavor of all the governments to reduce that fiscal deficit as much as possible, but due to various factors, you can't really bring it down to zero in a case like India. For example, when the COVID-19 crisis hit, the government of India had a huge shortfall of revenue, so we had to take a lot more money outside. So we are consistently trying to reduce this fiscal deficit. How do you reduce a fiscal deficit? Number one, you increase your own tax collection. You get more money from the people that owe you money. And secondly, you stop your wasteful expenditure. Wasteful expenditure can be subsidies, can be different schemes that are not required. So this is what this chapter mainly talks about. Where do we stand in terms of the money that the government owes? Not just at the central level, but at the state level as well. Where is the government spending money now? What is the way forward? So this chapter in the introduction says that in this year, the government has been trying to focus on fiscal stability and not expand its debt further. In this year, the fiscal deficit gross is estimated to be 5.9% of the GDP. Now, we do have a law about it as well. The law says, the FRBM Act says that we should bring it to 3 to 3.5% of the GDP. So it's a long way right now, but we are going in that direction. So let's see what are the fiscal indicators this chapter quotes one by one. First, it talks about the fact that the government is on the path of declining or reducing the fiscal deficit. The aim is that the next financial year, FY26, our fiscal deficit should reach 4.5% of the GDP, which will be a good way forward. The total expenditure this year of the government is about 45 lakh crore rupees. A lot of focus has been given on infrastructure spending, social sector schemes, and defense modernization. Now, the FRBM Act, as I was telling you, says that at the state level also, the states also should restrict their fiscal deficit to 3% of the state GDP or gross state domestic product. Now, this is where a lot of states have been struggling. In fact, if you look at a lot of states, because of this new culture of freebies, a lot of states are under humongous debt. Look at states such as Himachal Pradesh, such as Punjab. These are under humongous debt because they have taken so much money just to give it in the form of freebies or subsidies. So a lot of states are well above this 3% limit where they should be. This is the trend of how the fiscal deficit has been reduced by the government. As you can see, post-COVID, it was pretty high because the government had a shortfall of revenue. So they had to take a lot more money. But consistently, it has been on a downturn. The expectation is government is hoping that by the next financial year, we bring this number down to 4.5% of the GDP. But again, this is not going to be easy because when the government reduces fiscal deficit, it means the government has to take out or stop certain government schemes or government subsidies. People may not take it very well. On the other hand, revenue collection or being more efficient with revenue collection is another way that the government can bring down the fiscal deficit. Gross tax revenue grew by 10.7% year on year, and the direct tax collections grew by 12.4% year on year. The highest tax that is collected is in the form of the GST. GST collections also increased. Average monthly collection this financial year was 1.65 lakh crore. Now, out of all of that, the one area where we saw a decline in the tax collection was excise and custom duty. It declined slightly, but not a very sudden surge. It's just a very small gradual decline. but we made up for it in the other systems or in the other taxing forms. This is how the tax revenue has come in. As you can see in the gross tax revenue, GST makes up the most, 48%. Then in terms of direct taxes that you pay directly to the government, the corporate tax makes up the most. Then comes income tax. Now please understand and remember, there are different ways in which a question can be framed from here in the prelims exam. The question can be, which of the following is the largest contributor of direct taxes in India? That would be corporate tax. Or if the question is, which is the largest contributor of tax revenue in India? It would be the GST. So it depends upon what kind of a question there is. Please do remember this information as well. One key focus area is capital expenditure and fiscal priorities. As I told you earlier, the government is very adamant on increasing its capital expenditure, which is a good sign for the economy. Capital expenditure means money spent on building hard infrastructure, roads, ports, railways, airports. All these come in the category of capital expenditure. They bring in a lot more jobs. Also, they build heavy infrastructure, which is helpful for the businesses in the long run. So capital expenditure as a percentage of total expenditure has increased to 21.4%, which is a good sign. Major areas where capital expenditure has been done include road and highways, railways, power, renewable energy, urban development, etc. So these are the areas where focus has been put of capital expenditure. Again, when the government cuts down its expenditure, usually the government tries not to cut down capital expenditure, because capital expenditure brings jobs. Capital expenditure has a good, important connection with the business in the country as well. This is where capital expenditure has been spent this year. The highest allocation is to the railways, then road and highways, then comes in defense. Now in defense also, please understand, not all the money spent in defense is capital expenditure. So when you talk about defense, a lot of money goes into pension, then salary. That is not capital expenditure. So when you're buying weapons, that is capital expenditure. The other parts are revenue expenditure. Those are not capital expenditures. At the state level also, a lot of states are trying to now bring their bring their fiscal deficit under control, but many states are outliers here as well. There has been a higher tax devolution from the center, means more money has gone from center to the states to help them in reducing their fiscal deficit, giving them a signal that you should not take a lot of loans. But freebies and this kind of a politics has had a negative impact. Many states, as you know, have also gone back to the old pension scheme. That has also had a negative impact. Now, the public debt that the government owes is at 81.6% of the GDP. It's expected it will also reduce in the coming years. The center's net market borrowing was about 11.8 lakh crore for this financial year. One big component of the revenue receipts that we have is the interest payment. So that is a big concern, because a lot of money that we earn, that just most part of it or big part of it just goes into the interest that we have to repay because the loans that we have taken. So when you take lesser loans, you have lesser interest to pay. That also is the government's endeavor to reduce the interest payments in the long run. What about the subsidies that contribute a lot to fiscal deficit? The government is trying to reduce subsidy burden increasingly. Total subsidy expenditure has reduced to 1.8% of GDP, which is, again, if you see in the last 5 years, this is a good progress. We were at 3.1% of GDP in financial year 21. We have reached 1.8% rather, almost half, so which is a good thing. Major food subsidies right now are given in food and fertilizer. With fertilizer also, the government is trying to push the farmers towards nano urea, towards having much better, much more efficient, rationalized use of fertilizer. So the government is trying to push the farmers away from heavily subsidized urea. Other social welfare schemes that get subsidy from the government include Manrega, which has an allocation of 73,000 crore this year. Then health sector spending also increased. Ayushman Bharat, as it expands, as you know, under Ayushman Bharat now, senior citizens are covered without any exception. So that also increases the government's bill of all these schemes. That also comes in the form of subsidies. This is again something that the government has to keep in mind. These are certain suggestions that the economic survey gives in chapter number 11. Financial year 26, that is next year, the aim is to bring fiscal deficit down to 4.5%. We are aiming for that. Again, it's not going to be that easy, but that is the aim. The focus areas remain having better tax compliance, having more people pay their taxes that they owe, encouraging fiscal health in the states as well, encouraging private sector also to bring in more investment. This is what the suggestion is as per the economic survey. This was chapter number 11. I have a few questions for you to test what you studied here. First, which of the following statements regarding India's fiscal deficit is correct? It is projected to increase in FY25 as compared to 24. No, projected to remain the same. Estimated to decline to 4.5% of GDP by next financial year. Yes, this is what we have been discussing. That is the estimate that by next year it should be 4.5%. Next, which component contributes the most to India's tax revenue? We just discussed this. Overall tax revenue, the biggest contributor is the GST. If it would have been direct tax, then corporate tax would have been the answer. One more, which of the following is not a factor in India's fiscal consolidation strategy? Increasing capital expenditure, reducing subsidies, expanding fiscal deficit beyond 6%. So this is opposite. When you want to ensure fiscal consolidation, you want to cut down your fiscal deficit and not take it beyond. So you have to cut it down. This is not a factor. Others are factors, others are things that the government of India has been trying to ensure. This was our chapter number 11. Tomorrow be back here to see chapter number 12. If you want to have PDF of this session, do join my Telegram channel. The link is in the description of the video. Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Jai Hind.